Hey, bub, I keep telling you, don't call me Wolvie! Snicked.
Coming to Grand Rapids, Michigan on September 21st and 22nd is GrandCon Gaming and Comics Convention, presented by Celebration Cinemas. Join us in playing or chatting it up with fellow enthusiasts in a community that understands your passions. Get lost in the adventure of your favorite role-playing game. Admire costumes and art from vendors and attendees. Meet the creators behind your favorite mainstream and independent games and comic books. Check out unpublished games and sneak peek at things to come. You can get all this and more at GrandCon. For more information, please visit www.grand-con.com. Welcome to The Pullbag. Join us as we dig out our latest comics and discuss them with the rotating panel of the GCRN crew. So sit back and enjoy this week's Pullbag.
What's the matter? Teacher's pet got cold feet? Anytime, pretty boy.
Cyclops!
I adjust the setting on the back of my snowball, so that may have helped.
That sounds so wrong.
Ha!
I know what you're talking about, but I'm sorry, I will never have a snowball mic because it just friggin' Clerks. Kevin Smith. Ugh, God. Hello and welcome to the Pullbag. This is episode 24, and no, we will not be pulling any 180s this time around. That Xbox joke never gets old.
Never does.
And as you could hear, for those of you, maybe 10 people that listen to Off the Cuff.
There's got to be at least 15.
Yeah, at least.
At least.
15, 30,
Nah.
something like that. I am TFG and Mike, and I have with me one of the hosts from Off the Cuff, formerly of XRG, which is what Off the Cuff originally was, and of course he originated with his buddy Mike Powers over at the lunch table, room, gym, cafeteria, whatever that show was called.
We had an identity issue there, so...
Yes, very much so. Like, every time I saw that podcast artwork, I'm like, I want a sandwich.
Yeah. I know, I had that problem too, and it's the alien intro confused me. It was like a mystery meat sandwich every week. We're getting there.
Whatever you do, don't have the blue plate special.
Yeah. You don't ask what's in the blue plate special if you order.
Yeah, exactly. So, of course, I am TFG and Mike. Joining me is Danner from Off the Cuff and formerly of XRG and all that stuff. And we're here to talk about comic books. For those of you, hopefully, listen to the Pullbag, all 10 of you. We've been going 24 episodes strong every now and then. I didn't want this comic book podcast to just be, hey, we're going to sit down and review this, and then we'll do the same thing next week. I wanted to kind of mix it up, and we do what I call Origins episodes, where I'll bring in someone that I want to basically put them on the grill and, fry up another Barbie. It's a bad shrimp joke.
Is there going to be a lot of food references?
I am so floundering right now.
Should you have eaten before we started this? Is this going to be a recurring theme?
Yes.
Okay.
So pretty much basically what these Origins episodes are is me getting together with someone that I want to talk with and want to find out more about. And it's finding out about their comic origins. And Danner is in the hot seat this time around. And
Woohoo.
I'm sure at some point or another I'll have Joe or Mike Powers or any of the other off-the-cuff crew at some point down the line. So why don't you just, first of all, for those that don't listen Off the Cuff, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself, why you're a geek, how you got into being a geek in general. You're mostly a gamer, right?
Mostly a gamer. I grew up in a very geekly supported household. I was an only child, which also kind of helped that whole situation. I was incredibly spoiled. I won't lie about that. My mom supported pretty much any endeavor that I wanted to get involved with. From early on, it was the twofold of video gaming and comic books, and which was only more equally expressed with my father, who's, he's a little bit older. He's, nearing the 80-year mark, and there's quite an age difference between my mom and my dad, but my dad is of a slightly older generation, but he'd never liked to really talk about his childhood that much. But it was one of those things that when I started expressing interest in comic books, he's like, oh yeah, I used to collect comics too. And I was like, oh really? It was like, what kind of stuff did you read? He goes, at one point in time, I owned a copy of Action Comics #1. I was like, you're kidding me. He's like, no. He's like, I had X-Men #1 also.
I'm pretty sure anybody of his generation that was into comics would have owned a copy of those.
Oh, yeah. And he told me about all these comics that he used to read and all these comics that he used to collect. But then of that era also, when he got done reading them and they laid around, when Mom took the trash out,
oh, no.
all the comics went in the trash.
Oh, no.
But it was just of that generation. It was they were never, at that point, they were never seen as collectibles like we see them today. Yeah. So just hearing these stories from him telling me about all the old comics he used to read and the first appearance of Lex Luthor and, the origin stories of Magneto and just how into it he used to be. And then just like, I cry on the inside just thinking about like, my God, if he would have just, even if it was a terrible condition, had it, just thinking about like how much these things are worth today, even in 2.0 graded material, they're still worth, hundreds of thousands of dollars for Action Comics #1. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me. But it was my dad's, kind of always kind of been the straight-laced, hard-working salesman type of a character in my life, and to see him kind of, when I started getting interested in comics, kind of, showing that, that was the kind of thing he was into. And, coming home days from school and finding him on my Nintendo playing Super Mario Brothers 2, beating levels I've never beaten before. It was just like, my dad's like a closet geek at heart, but he just never would, embrace it and show that in an everyday type of situation with us. And it was just, kind of a little bit of something that kind of brought me and him a little bit closer together, was that fact that he helped embrace it for me.
Well, back then when we were younger, because I don't know how old you are, but I'm 33, so I was born in 80. Back when we were growing up, it was like, being a geek wasn't a good thing.
Well, and I was born in 80 also.
Oh, okay. Well,
So it's right there with you. It didn't really start kind of being embraced more until, the late 90s, early 2000s is when it really started to come to the forefront.
Yeah, and I would say probably around 2003, 2005 is really when it kind of, like between that 2-year period is really where geek culture kind of really came to the forefront of pop culture. And it's just one of those things where I specifically remembered in school there were when in elementary school when we were told to write a journal or write whatever for part of our English class, they specifically told us there are certain things you cannot write down in this book, and I intentionally wrote everything down that they told me not to.
I was gonna say, I remember it was in middle school. We did, I'm sure like your school probably did also, they did like a young authors week where you write stories. I wrote X-Men fan fiction. I wrote an entire book with X-Men fan fiction, and then I gave it to my mom, who took it to work and then typed it up for me. She, however, thought that every single one of the X-Men's names were typed or written incorrectly, so she corrected all of them to what she thought they were supposed to be. So I got a typed up version of my story back with all the names completely wrong. I was like, who's Gumbo? Oh, that's not right. I was like, no, it's supposed to be Gambit. Who's Boast? It's a Beast. What did you do to me? These were spelled correctly. She's like, I thought they were wrong. They didn't. The names out of context didn't make any sense to me. It's like, Mom, you've ruined everything. I love you, but you've ruined everything. And it was just, I mean, like, I was really into it. From an early age, my parents gave me, like, the cutesy comic books. Like, I would get, like, Mickey Mouse comic books and Donald Duck stuff and Kool-Aid Man and Jello Man and just, like, some super lame comics. But I remember in particularly in November of 1989, specifically, my mom worked for United Airlines. We did a ton of traveling back then. So we were in Colorado at the airport there, and I was bored. I didn't really have anything to do. I think the batteries in my Game Boy had died at that point in time. And we stopped by a newsstand that was there, and I saw Batman issue 441. Never read a superhero comic before in my entire life at that point in time, at the age of 9, and my dad bought me Batman 441, and that was my first superhero comic ever.
Oh, wow.
And it was part 3 of a 5-part series, which was a crossover between the Teen Titans and Batman. And it was a story arc called A Lonely Place of Dying, and the entire issue is Tim Drake figures out who Batman is, and figures out who Dick Grayson is. And this is right after Jason Todd got killed.
Oh, geez.
And Batman is going head-to-head with Two-Face and is basically doing everything in his power to just go absolutely apeshit on all the villains in Gotham because he's grieving and doesn't know how to deal with the death of Jason Todd. And is just getting shot at, and is getting bones broken, and is just pushing through because he thinks he deserves the punishment. And the entire issue is Tim Drake convincing Dick Grayson to put the Robin costume back on and go help Batman.
Oh, wow.
Is the entire issue. And it's a super dark, very conversation-heavy comic, and that was my first superhero comic. And
okay, you say that was your first superhero comic. Was that your, like, what was it? Your mom? Was it your dad? Who was it that first took you into? Because I don't think back then there were comic shops. If there were, they were very underground.
They were at that point in time. There was, like I said, it was at a newsstand in an airport, and then like pretty much when we got back to town, I think my dad, I think, realized that maybe Batman wasn't the best thing for a 9-year-old to possibly start with. So
You think?
So eventually, like, the local grocery store carried comics. So when we went back home, I started reading comics from there. Now everything was kind of sporadic. There was no pull list. There was none of that stuff. At that point in time, it was basically, I knew every single week when the shipment came in. I got to become friends with the person that worked in the magazine aisle. I was in there every single week when the new magazines came in. Yeah. And I was reading Archie Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That was like the first big series that I got into. Was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and eventually Mutanimals. I was reading Defenders of Dynatron City miniseries. So basically, most of everything that I was reading at that point was all based off of a Saturday morning cartoon. I think every freaking thing, and for some reason, which I came across these in my collection the other day, I started picking up just random stuff. Like, I don't even know like NFL Super Pro from Marvel. Have no idea why I was reading that. I hated sports. I still hate sports. I have no idea why I was buying it. I think it was because Spider-Man was on the cover of one of the issues, and I was like, yeah, I'll just pick it up and check it out. So
Spider-Man was on the cover. Spider-Man's face on a lot of those older comics. Spider-Man's face was on every
well, I
comic.
was unfortunate that I eventually got into that string of, which it took me a while to realize the trick was every time a Marvel comic came out and I saw that they had a crossover and Wolverine or Spider-Man was in it, I would pick it up, and then I realized that they were doing that in every freaking book, where they would just be like, "Hey, readership's down on this book. Let's throw Spider-Man in," and then I would like, "Oh, I'll buy this," and then read a couple issues of Spider-Man's, and then you continue on in the series. And it was just every cliche that they get to pull people in when I was in my young teens fell for every single one of those things. My parents were just like, "Oh yeah, it's you're reading, at least you're reading something, so we'll continue to embrace it." And I was like, "Okay, awesome." So every single time, and then I felt it got bad. I mean, like I was picking up everything with like Spider-Man and Wolverine in it, and then every time a #1 issue of anything came out, I just picked it up to check it out. Like if I had interested in it or not, it was like, "Ooh, #1, this will be worth something someday." I was naive, incredibly naive, when it came to my comic book collecting. So I have an entire box of books in my attic that is literally just entitled it's the #1 box or the last issue box, which every time there was a last issue of a series that I never read, I would pick up the last issue. Every time I saw first issue of a series, I'd pick up the first issue. So there's just this box in my attic that is just filled with all these series that I picked up the first or the last issue of, but I've never read any other portion of the entire series.
Oh my god.
Oh yeah, like I said.
See, this is why I love trades.
Yeah, and it was a lot of like drugstores and grocery stores is pretty much where all of my comics got supplied from.
Yeah.
And then eventually a comic book store opened up in Brighton, which was a couple cities over, and then I finally got to embrace what a real comic book store was. And I was in there often. I didn't know what a pull list was. I didn't know what a pull bag was. I just assumed that if you wanted your comics, you had to be there every single day the comics came out. So I made my parents drag me out there every single day the comics came out. So, I mean, and was it always Wednesdays? Because I didn't get, like, I've never, like, I dabbled when I was a kid, but I didn't actually start heavily collecting until Death of the Family pulled me in last year. But I have always wondered if it has always been Wednesdays for comics. See, and I don't remember it always being Wednesdays because I want to say that I think the grocery store got them late than what a comic store would have gotten, because they got every Thursday was when they put the new stuff out at the grocery store. But I know when I started going to the comic shops, it was Wednesdays. And yeah, my readership was all over the place. I was reading Superman. I started reading Batman regularly around right before Nightfall started. Was when I first started reading Batman. The first issue of Superman I ever picked up was the cameo appearance of Doomsday. That happened to be the first time I picked up a Superman comic and read it. So the last panel of the issue he shows up, which was the first cameo appearance of Doomsday, was my first issue, and that's happened to be just when I started. Didn't even know the whole Death of a Superman Doomsday thing was happening. That just happened to be when I started reading it. So I read Superman all through. I got into Superman. I started reading that all the way through Death of a Family, and then the Reign of the Supermen, and then the Return of Superman, and then the first issue that Blue Electric Energy Superman came in, I dropped the book. I was done. So I was going to say, I read Superman solid for 3 years. I was going to say the first real big Batman story arc I got into when I first started reading Batman was I picked up Shadow the Bat #1, which that was when I really got into Batman. And I want to say that entire storyline from Shadow of the Bat is Batman in Arkham Asylum as a prisoner.
Oh,
Is the entire like first, I want to say 6 to 10 issues of Shadow of the Bat is just Batman as a inmate in Arkham, and just crazy, super dark stuff. Really, really well written.
yeah. I remember reading. I don't know what it might have been. Shadow of the. I honestly don't remember what the title was. I've told the story many times on this show. When I was 9 or 10, my mom went into some. It wasn't even a thrift store. It was some consignment. I don't know what the hell it was. It was some store, and she came home with this giant Batman comic, like graphic novel, like giant, like the book had to be at least 4 or 5 inches thick. I mean, it wasn't your standard trade paperback size. It was like kind of like what the Nightfall collections are now. It was huge.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the hell it was. I just remember it scared the crap out of me. Batman has always been, and he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be dark. That's his point. But yeah, I don't know.
But
go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, I started like it was weird because I started as kind of fairly heavy into DC. Mm-hmm. And then I found an issue in a plastic bag of a man standing over another man with smoke coming out of his chest, and I was like, what the hell is this? And it says Executioner's Song Part 1. And I was like, this looks interesting. I was like, it's an X-Men book. I'm like, I kind of know what the X-Men are. I'll pick this up. So I pick up Executioner's Song, which is like a huge Marvel X-Men crossover. Crosses over through like all of the X books, and I pick up the first issue, and the first issue is Cable assassinating Professor Xavier.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I have no idea who half these people are, but this is pretty awesome. So I start collecting the Executioner Song series, and eventually I just get sucked into the X-Men universe and completely drop out of Batman, completely drop out of Superman, pretty much turned tail and ran on the DC universe and fully went into the X-Men universe. And I say X-Men universe because of the fact that anybody who's a hardcore X-Men fan will realize that yes, there's a Marvel universe, but if there's anything that is more of a splinter in the entire Marvel universe, it's the X-Men line of stuff, because it feels like it's an entire comics universe within another universe. Because nobody ever embraces or seems to talk about the X-Men in any other book in that entire universe. And the X-Men are just always seem to be off doing their own thing. And there's something about that universe that completely dragged me in, that to this day, I still read X-Men comic books, and I've always been very heavily into them. And I mean, throughout, time, I got into a lot of other books. Like I really got into Spider-Man, for a good long while. I was really, really into Spider-Man until A Brand New Day happened. And then I just got pissed and was done. The moment they kind of undid everything that they did in Civil War, I was like, are you kidding me? I was like,
what?
I
think a lot of people
what a damn cop-out. I was like, they had the potential to do so many cool things with the fact that Peter Parker was known to the world as Spider-Man, and they were just like, oh god, it's too difficult, we wrote ourselves into a wall, how do we undo this?
That's kind of like people saying, like, when I say people, I mean like movie directors, producers, writers. That's like people going back and saying, oh no, Peter can't age. He has to be always in high school. He can't go to college. He can't grow up and become Spider-Man. He has to be teenage Spider-Man.
But that's some of the coolest things they did, was when he's adult Spider-Man and he's a science teacher at his old high school. How awesome was that? I mean, it was like coming full circle. And the fact that they were embracing the geek element of things in that book and celebrating people for their smarts and their wits, and it just always loved that book because of that. And it's it just drove me crazy when they're like, well, if we break Mary Jane up and Peter, everybody should be okay with this. And to put icing on the cake, we'll even bring Harry back. And it was just like, I was happy to see Harry back, but I'm like, it felt like they just cut off at the knees so much potential.
I don't know if this is just my own brain thinking this, but I always and I come from watching the animated series before ever reading Spider-Man issues. So for me, Spidey and Black Cat together, I always wanted to see them permanently together. At least from the cartoon aspect, because wow, was Black Cat hot in that cartoon.
I know, and trust me, even in the comic books, you kind of wanted it to happen all the time.
Yeah,
so I don't know. I've always been a Gwen Stacy guy, so I've always liked the original. So like when Amazing Spider-Man the movie came out, I was like, oh,
this
they're gonna do it right.
Gwen Stacy we've wanted, not Opie's daughter. Thank you very. I'm sorry. She might be a great. Bryce Dallas Howard might be a great actress in her own right and something else, but as Gwen Stacy, she was the worst. Outside of too many villains, she was the worst part of Spider-Man 3 for me.
I try not to embrace the existence of that movie at all. I really don't. That movie hurt me on so many levels I can't even describe. It was just, for a guy who's been reading Spider-Man books for as long as I have, just to watch that movie just tore at my soul in every single possible way.
Now, would you say that it hurt you more than Brand New Day did?
Yeah, I would definitely say that Spider-Man 3 hurt me more than Brand New Day did, which is difficult for me to say, but I think it cut deeper. Because it's the emo Spider-Man stuff. I think that's really what that dance sequence, that's what did me in. That was like, Sam Raimi, I know you're trying to add some kind of wit and charm to it, but oh my god, you're killing me.
Wit and charm? He basically went back to his horror days. Holy crap, that whole scene was horrific.
Oh, it was.
Alright, so what are you, like, so you've been with comics all along. Has there ever been a point where you said, screw it, I'm done, and I want to move on to something else?
There was a big period, like, towards when I got into high school, I started playing, sports, and But
you hate sports.
It was more... okay, to back that up. It was more so I became a very fat kid because of my asthma. Mm-hmm. So I needed to do something. And the ability the moment I got into sports, I realized that my parents kind of got off my back and they seemed really, really happy. And I was like, well, I can ride this wave. I mean, high school's only 4 years, right? I was like, it makes them happy when I'm doing sports, and they let me get away with more shit. So I concocted the plan of, I only got to play football for 4 years, and then I don't have to do it again. So I played football for 4 years. They were happy, and they stayed off my back the entire time, and I embraced that, and I rolled with it. And the moment when the college offered me to go play football, I said, no, thank you. I am done. I am good, because my parents won't care if I play college ball. I don't need to. So I passed on that. But I just, it made my parents happy. I kept them off my back, and it kind of let, me do what I needed to do. But backpedaling a little bit, the times that I stopped collecting, my things got tight at home, and everybody was kind of cutting back, and I felt that was the one thing that I could do for the family at that point in time. Is, I think it was my sophomore year, I gave up comic book collecting to kind of help save money for the family. And trust me, at that point in time, it was like an $80 to $90 a week habit at that point in time.
Oh, geez.
So me cutting back on comics was a big thing. So I stopped collecting about my sophomore year of high school, and then that I didn't collect again until, I want to say, my freshman year of college. One of the first things I did when I moved out to Grand Rapids is I settled into my college dorm, and then I jumped online and looked for the closest comic book store the moment I got to college, and then found a comic book store. And for 13 years now, I've been going to that exact same store.
Oh, oh.
I've had a pull bag there for, well, I should say originally I had a pull box there. But the I stopped going there for a few years in that 13-year period, and now I've been reduced to a bag because I left them for a while. But that's okay. I'm working my way back up to the folder file. So, the it was, I mean, every time that I've quit has been basically for, financial reasons. It's like the first thing that I'll cut out if I need to stop something or I need extra money.
Right. Yeah.
And then that also started I didn't collect for 5 years. So there was a 5-year gap in my X-Men and Uncanny X-Men. So I went back and then I tracked down all the issues that I was missing. Which at some points in time got a little pricier than I would have hoped for. But, sometimes you just got to collect them.
Now, when you say you went back and got all the issues you missed, do you mean single or trade?
Oh, no. I went for issue per issue per issue.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you really...
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little...
Yeah, a little excessive at times.
Yeah, well, see, with me,
No,
what I do now is I will get the single issues to cure my, holy crap, I need to read this now.
Yeah.
Aspect of it, and then down the line I'll say, hey, look, I want to actually collect this, so I'll take these single issues, trade them in, get store credit, and buy the trade when the trade comes out. So,
well, I was gonna say, in my attic right now there are 9 long boxes and about 7 short boxes filled.
wow.
All the way. 3 of those long boxes are just X-Men and Uncanny X-Men issues. It got so bad that when I was recollecting that 5-year gap, I kept forgetting what issues I bought. So I'd go out and I find a really good deal on back issues, and then I get home and I'd be like, holy shit, I already got 3 of these. And I don't get rid of them. They just keep, when we do I've slowly started to get rid of stuff now, because when we do the Geek Garage sale, which we're in the 3rd year of doing the Geek Garage sale, which alls it is we bring people together in the community with all their toys and collectibles that are trying to get rid of their toys and collectibles to buy other toys and collectibles. It's literally just a bunch of geeks getting together, completely geeking out for 2 days straight, and trading and selling their geek merch. And I finally, pulled a box aside, and I was like, I got all these extra issues. I'm just going to put a $1 price tag on everything in the box. And if they go, they go. If they don't, no big deal. So I finally started to get, some of the excess stuff. Like, I have a ton of G.I. Joe Image comics. I don't know why. I don't even really care for G.I. Joe that much, but for some reason I saw that the new series came out, and it took me 28 issues to figure out that I didn't care for the series that much. So unfortunately I'm stubborn, and it takes me a lot for me to get in it. Like, I'll read something and then it'll take me a long time to convince myself that I'm not enjoying the series, but I was just like, well, maybe if I just get to the end of this story arc, maybe it'll pick up. And then I was like, okay, that wasn't so bad. And then I'll read the next story arc, and I was like, it wasn't that great. And
see, for me, that's kind of where I'm at with. Well, I'll get your opinions on this in a moment, but for me, going full tilt into comics, because I've never done so before, as I said last October, it was Batman issue 13, Death of the Family. Yeah. Holy crap, the Joker's back. Oh my god. And me coming from the background of loving and pretty much knowing almost everything I can about the DC animated universe, I'm like, oh, cool, I can hear Kevin Conroy in my head as I read this. And I was like, oh, this is so cool, this is so great. And then I started reading other stuff and other stuff and other stuff, and it's gotten to the point now where I think, including trades, I'm spending probably anywhere between $90 and $160 a month. Yeah, it's a lot. But it's between Transformers, He-Man, Turtles, Batman, Spider-Man, Superior Spider-Man, we'll talk about that later. But for me, I go by character.
Yeah.
I don't go, like when I first started reading Nightwing, it was because of Death of the Family, and I'm like, ooh, I like Nightwing. I like Dick Grayson. Notice I added the last name so no one can make a joke. uh, so I go by the characters. Sure, there are certain aspects, like when at the time DC fired Gail Simone and there was a writer that wasn't her on Batgirl 17 and 18. I didn't care for those issues because I didn't like the way the stories were written. But at the same time, thankfully, the online community came together and DC did the right thing and hired Gail back. And she's back writing Batgirl. And everything I've read of hers to this point with Batgirl, I've really enjoyed. I haven't enjoyed as much as I enjoy the character of Batgirl. I don't know what it is. When that other writer took over for those 2 issues, I just didn't feel any connection to it whatsoever. So I see what you're saying about reading so many issues and then be like, I really don't like this. That's kind of where I am with Batman right now. It's like, I'll continue to read this. There hasn't been any, oh my god, I cannot read this anymore because it's pissing me off so much moments, but it's like I read it to the point of, I hope it gets better.
Yeah, well, there's very few writers that can come into a series and totally just kill it for me. There's 2 in particular that have done it, though. And I may catch a lot of flack from this, especially from most X-Men fans, but Chris Claremont is a very well-known writer in the X-Men universe. He's a very well-known writer, period.
Right.
But he used to be really good back in the 90s. But when he came back in the 2000s and started writing Uncanny X-Men, and it was just like, Chris Claremont has a massive hard-on for Psylocke. A ridiculous hard-on for Psylocke. He just loves throwing her in books. Like, she was dead for 3 years before Claremont came back, and the first thing he did was bring Psylocke back. And it was just like, I don't see why she's in here. The only reason they seem to brought her in there is they had X-23 join the X-Men, and it's basically they bring Psylocke in to make X-23 look stupid because it was obvious from the way Claremont was writing he does not like X-23 at all. And it was like, I really like that character, and now, Claremont's just shitting all over. And I was like, this is driving me crazy. But I'm like, it's uncanny. I'm like, he's not going to be on here forever. He'll do a story arc and then he'll leave. It'll be fine. I got through it. One of my other favorite books at the time was Exiles, though, which I always loved that series. I've read it since I loved the character of Blink in Age of Apocalypse, and they brought her into her own miniseries, and then her miniseries spun into Exiles, and it's just a team of alternative reality Marvel characters that are jumping in from reality to reality, fixing things throughout time. It's like Quantum Leap with X-Men.
Wow.
It's a fun book because the environments change all the time. It's a new premise all the time, and there's no rules to it. They just jump from reality to reality. And then Chris Claremont got brought in. And then they ended the book and then rebooted the book with Claremont and then brought Psylocke in as the head of the team and took Blink out. And I was like, what the hell? It was like Blake's been in it for 100 and some odd issues, and you're just gonna. I'm done. I was like, I can't take this anymore. It was like Claremont comes in and just craps over everything I like, and then there's Grant Morrison, who also, I know some people love him. I know some people hate him. His run on X-Men, New X-Men, was one of the most bizarre runs I've ever seen. Everything felt like it was building to something, and then how he ended stuff, I was just like, I have no idea what the hell just happened. I've been reading this for the last 2 years, and it's just an amalgamation of crap. Everything was heading towards something, and I have no idea what happened, and I feel like I wasted 2 years of my life reading this book. And is he still writing Batman?
He's still writing Batman Inc., yes.
Yeah. Okay. How's that going?
I don't read Batman Inc. because one of the reasons why I don't read Batman Inc. and is I'm one of these people, and I don't know how many like me are there out there, but I cannot stand Damian Wayne.
Yeah,
cannot stand him.
That's the first time I've heard that.
I just can't. Okay, I've said this before. I don't know if I think I've said it on this show. I don't remember. I know I've told Steve Megatron this. Damian Wayne is the son of Talia al Ghul and Bruce Wayne. Bruce wants to raise him to be disciplined, to be, the legacy, so Bruce can, when Bruce eventually gets old and gets sick and tired of taking painkillers so he can survive every friggin' night he goes out and beats people up, so he can have something to leave his legacy to. Talia wants to raise and have him become the next Ra's al Ghul. I just don't get it. And the first time I ever read The Kid, was in that early part of the Death of the Family run in Batman 13, 14, 15. I think it's in 15. Batman 15, where all the exposition is amongst the team, and that's kind of where the Bat Family rift happened in that storyline. And Damian is just this snot-nosed little brat. He tries to be that upper crust, I just cannot stand him. The only thing I wish would have happened from Death of the Family, the only reason why I'm let down by that storyline, is that instead of actually the Joker killing somebody, Damian, they actually had allowed Grant to do it over in ink, and had Talia send her Batman clone guy. I don't even know. I don't know. I just don't care enough to read Batman Inc. I'm currently reading just the Bat books. Batman, Batgirl, Nightwing, and Batman and whoever the next name. It's Batman and Robin, but since Robin died, they've renamed the book every issue. There was Batman and Red Robin, Batman and Batgirl, Batman and Catwoman. So the one that Peter J. Tomasi is doing, I like that. It's okay, but I don't know if I could go into the beginning. I started at issue 15 when it was Batman versus Robin before Damian died, and I don't know if I care to buy the trades enough to just consistently complain about a character I don't give a shit about.
Yeah.
I mean, I found it amazingly well written and well done what they did on how they memorialized Damian in the books, but as far as stuff with him in it, I don't give a shit.
Yeah, I'll never forget when Joe was collecting Batman right when Grant Morrison took over the book. And he goes, "Who the hell's Grant Morrison?" I'm like, "Why are you asking?" I'm like, because I was like, he's the guy that kind of screwed up X-Men for me. He's like, he just started writing Batman, and it's kind of weird. He's like, Batman has a son now. I was like, what? A son? And he started explaining Damian, and he goes, the kid's just a dick. And I was just like, really? And he just went off on a tangent about just how much he dislikes it. I was like, then why are you reading it? He's like, because I keep hoping he's going to get killed at some point in time. He's like, I just want to see bad things happen to this kid. And I was like, well, if that's what motivates you, that's what motivates you, man. So
I think my issue at this point, after reading all of the Bat from 13 to, what is it, 22 now, 21, 22, whatever's out now. I think my issue with that is the whole thing of Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. They're an amazing writing artist team. They're an amazing artist-writer team, and they're great. But my issue with the Bat books specifically that deal with Batman directly, Batman Inc., Batman and whatever, whatever character they're going to put in, all the New 52 stuff dealing with Batman, it's outside of the main title, everything else is continuing on in the present. And now Scott and Greg are going back for an entire year doing 0 year. So it's like back in the past, and it's like, how did Batman get his origin done? And I'm enjoying the book, but it's like, why have all these not counting Batgirl and Nightwing because they're separate characters, why have all these other Bat titles dealing directly with Batman when you have it's oh god, time in the New 52 just warps my brain sometimes.
Back before the 52, that was one of the things that always drove me nuts about Batman, is like they treated each story arc like it's a separate portion of the Batman story. It never felt really intercut, because a lot of times when I was reading it, like, they were bringing on a lot of guest writers, and like one of the storylines they did, which was Broken City, which was Brian Azzarello, who did 100 Bullets, and I really liked 100 Bullets, but I read the Batman story, the Broken City one, and it was just such a departure from, you know, what I knew of Batman, and just they did this depiction of Killer Croc where he seemed like he was a Russian gangster, and it just didn't make sense to what I knew of Batman. And it was just like, it's such a huge departure. Like, I could have seen this as like an out of context miniseries, but they include this in the numbering. It just seems asinine to me. It's like, it has nothing to do with anything that was going on in the previous storyline, and just everything. It was like pretty much everything after Hush felt really disjointed and out of place in the book, because everything was like, let's bring on a guest writer after Hush and do like these two-shot stories, and nothing's actually interconnected, and it got to be a real mess. It felt like they didn't know what they were doing with the Batman books after Hush wrapped up.
Yeah, and see, that's one of the reasons why I love the New 52, because I can start fresh. I don't have, like, and I've said this before many times on the show, and I'm sure people are tired of me saying this, and I will only say it for your benefit since this is your first time on here, is that the only reason why I really love the New 52 is because I don't have to go back, start at issue 600 and something, and be like, oh, I have to read the last 600, you know, say I started issue 621. Holy crap, I have to read the last 620 issues to catch up. That's why I like the New 52.
Yeah. And I was going to say, quite a bit later, you know, when I was really heavy into Marvel, I kind of started backpedaling and like going into, I started working at GameStop for a period of time, and when I was doing that, they're partner companies with Barnes & Noble, so I got a disgusting discount there. So I went graphic novel crazy, and I was just like, I want to read every single classic graphic novel that I should be reading that I haven't. So I went out and bought Kingdom Come, I bought The Long Halloween, I bought like all the classic Bat storylines, I bought all the like big, you know, events for DC, like Final Crisis and Zero Hour and all of those, and just started like eating all of those big massive storylines and I liked DC in the graphic novel sense, because I liked those really chunky, meaty stories like Kingdom Come, and just where all the characters are there, and just these beautiful illustrations and these great fights and just classic superheroes. But when it came to Marvel, it was like I wanted it on an issue by issue basis. I was into it all the time, and I was always, you know, there to buy those issues, but I was never really, you know, there for the graphic novels, where it's like DC to me has this rich history of all these things that they've done. But unfortunately, you know, I understand completely. I know a lot of people got up in arms about 52, but I completely got why it went to that point, because the storylines were getting so convoluted, and it felt like they didn't know where they were going with a lot of stuff, and it felt like they kept on writing themselves into certain walls, and then they kept on bringing guest writers in to do like these one shots, and it just felt like it was getting to be such a mess towards the end. And I know some people would disagree. Everybody's got their opinions, and I appreciate opinions. This is just how I feel. I think they needed a reboot. Now, when Marvel Now started, I don't understand, because it's like they tried to do a reboot, and I know they've kind of put a fresh spin on a ton of the books and renumbered everything, but I don't necessarily understand why they did what they did. Now, don't get me wrong, the entire start of the Marvel Now thing is what got me back into comics. Uncanny, I'd been out of comic books for, like 3 or 4 years, and the moment I heard Avengers versus X-Men, I was like, my interest is officially piqued. went to a comic book store. We were on a trip and went to a comic book store in North Carolina, and I went to Heroes Are Around the Corner, I think is the name of the comic book store. Walked into this comic book store, and there's a giant statue of Dr. Octopus. And on the other end of the room, there was a giant statue of Spider-Man fighting each other over top of the entire comic book store. And I was like, I have never seen a comic book store like this in my entire life. This is amazing. And I went in there, and I bought every single issue of Uncanny of Avengers versus X-Men, and then bought...
Isn't that just a 12-issue miniseries?
It was a 12-issue miniseries, and if I would have waited 2 weeks, I could have bought the trade paperback.
Right.
But I bought every single individual issue right there in the store, and then I bought the trade paperback X-Men Schism, which is kind of, where the battle between Cyclops and Wolverine and the splitting of the teams all started, which kind of eventually leads to all the events in...
Oh my god, why am I now picturing in my head the X-Men fighting in a Tool video?
Yeah. And it's it's kind of like that. And it was that, it's something they've been building towards for years in that book, is just that it's always been Logan and Scott. Always at the two opposite ends of the spectrum, and just the way things ended up going is genius to me. Where you always would have thought that maybe Logan would have gone off the deep end and Logan would have been the bad guy, and then in the end of it, it's Cyclops. Cyclops screwed everything up. Cyclops is the one that kills Professor Xavier. It's nuts. And just, I loved, just those 12 issues of Avengers versus X-Men were enough to be like, I'm sold. I'm in again. And I just, and then they're like, hey, we're bringing Brian Michael Bendis in to write all new X-Men. And I was like, okay, well, I can totally get behind that. And I feel like every time I pick up an issue of all new X-Men and read it, I feel like I'm 12 again. It's been the one book that just brings me back to the joy of comic books, because they, for those who are not reading it, Beast is at a complete loss, doesn't know what to do, feels the X-Men have gotten completely out of hand. Professor Xavier's been killed by Cyclops because he was taken over by the Phoenix Force, lost his mind, just snapped his neck, tossed him aside like a piece of crumpled paper. And then, expelled the Phoenix Force, and you could really see the fact that Scott really didn't feel bad about what happened. And Beast is at a loss. Something's wrong with his genetic mutation again, and he's dying, and as a last-ditch effort, he goes, well, maybe if I go into the past and confront my younger self in the original X-Men while they first get to school, maybe I can show them what's going to happen, and this will never happen. This reality will never exist. This will fix everything.
Right.
So he brings them all to the present and shows them what's happened and what's become. So all these people that they've literally just had their first encounter with Magneto in their reality. And then they get brought to the future where Cyclops has just killed Professor Xavier. And they get exposed, these naive children, and poor Iceman, who still looks like a snowman, come into the future and see what their future selves look like. And they decide to stay until they can fix and restore Professor Xavier's dream.
Damn.
And it's just the moment, just when Angel keeps going, why is nobody talking about me? Why has nobody mentioned my name? Why is nobody telling me what's going on? And Jean keeps looking around and goes, where am I? Why haven't I seen myself? And then Hank goes, you need to look into my mind. And then shows her what's happened to Jean Grey. And just Jean freaks out. And it's the role reversals of how they've changed the dynamics with the original team is just so subtle but great because of the fact that nobody trusts Cyclops in the future. which causes the team from the past to distrust Cyclops, and Jean Grey is now the leader of the original X-Men and is basically taking control. And Kitty Pryde is their the current the current timeline. Kitty Pryde has basically become their handler and is in charge of them. And it's just, the dynamics are just so all over the place. And then you bring in the fact that Scott has decided to create his own X-Men team with the new Uncanny X-Men, and they show up at the school with his right-hand man, who's Magneto. And these kids have just gotten done facing Magneto for the first time and are like, why the hell Cyclops with Magneto? And it's just all these things of what they know and shattering their realities and completely dismantling and putting these characters completely out of time with how messed up everything is in the current timeline. Is just the richness of the stories and the dialogue are just fantastic.
Yeah. For me with Marvel, like I mentioned earlier about single issue and then go back, trade it, and get the trade. That's how I am with DC and IDW.
Yeah.
For me and Marvel, I will always, outside of Superior Spider-Man, which I'll bring up in a second here, but oh boy, that's going to be a fun conversation. Outside of Superior Spider-Man and the 5-issue, I think it's 5-issue miniseries that they've got going on, just started last week or the week before, a couple weeks ago, Superior Carnage. Outside of that, I am not getting anything Marvel single issue. I will get Marvel in trades. I'm not that invested. Like, X-Men for me are the 92 series. Spider-Man for me is the 94 series, or even Ultimate Spider-Man, the new series. I love it. I love the comedy in that show.
Oh yeah.
I'm so engrossed in DC, and now that IDW has Transformers, Turtles, and what else do I get from them? I don't know. It's too much. So I'll slowly go back, and I've got a whole bunch of Punisher trades now, because eventually we're gonna do eventually on the pullback we're gonna do character months where we take 4 or 5 weeks out of 1 month and dedicate it to like Punisher, Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, and just review trades, once a week for a month or so. But I'm not a Marvel guy anymore.
And it's weird because I've had conversations with people, and I don't know exactly what you started in, but I know for a lot of people that my friend Tim was huge into Wolverine when he was growing up. Right. But he's a huge DC comic guy. I was huge into Batman when I was growing up. And I grew up to be a huge Marvel guy, and I thought it's interesting is a lot of people grow up really into one company or the other, and it seems that it kind of flip-flops when they get older for some people. I just, I started out as a Batman guy, and then I kind of became a Wolverine guy. I mean, it just was kind of my natural progression in my taste in comic books.
Yeah.
But I mean, I still go back and read stuff, and I mean, I've always, I always kind of keep tabs on Batman. When the bigger trades come out, I'll, pick one up and be like, oh god, this feels good. I haven't read something like this in a long time. Yeah. But and I was going to say, but I mean, even when I got through all those trades and stuff like that, I found myself getting into a lot more of the independent titles. Like the Mike Mignola Hellboy stuff, which I love. Like Frank Miller's Sin City, which I love that stuff. And I think a lot of the stuff was, I worked in a movie theater for like 9 years. So like every time I even heard a comic book movie was coming up and I didn't know something about it, I was like, I'll just go buy all the trades. And
yeah, exactly.
Before the movie comes out, I've read like all 9 volumes of Sin City. And
see, that's the same thing for me, but except in reverse, where I remember all the old cartoon series.
Yeah.
And remembering all of those, and in certain cases rewatching some of them on Netflix, I'm like, okay, cool, I'm ready for this movie. I'm ready to see Wolverine kick ass. I'm ready to see the Avengers unite, even though there are just certain things in both companies, DC and Marvel, that I just like the whole like Hal Jordan thing. Don't get me wrong, I like Hal in certain things, but I grew up on knowing that Kyle Rayner and John Stewart, they were my Green Lanterns, and I just, as of right now, without going back and reading other Green Lantern stuff with Hal in it, I just don't. Outside of the cool stuff he's done in it, he's been in an animation, I just don't care about Hal Jordan.
Well, and
I care more about Stewart and Rayner. And the same thing with Marvel. I've never gotten the event, like I've never understood the whole Avengers thing, and I think my main problem initially as a kid was that horrible United We Stand cartoon. I think that's where it went wrong for me. I'm like, Ant-Man, Wasp, what the hell is going... I love what Marvel did. I love what Marvel Studios did. They built up a cinematic universe, and they built up these characters. Yes, Hulk changed 3 different times, even though Crouching Tiger, Hidden Hulk doesn't count in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But they built it up. They built it up well, and they have really great actors in the Avengers movie, and I liked that. However, going back and looking at comics with Avengers, I don't even know if I can get into it. I just don't know.
I would say I was never a big Avengers guy. The first time I started reading Avengers was I started the story arc before Disassembled. I was going to say, if you get the chance, I totally recommend picking up, if you could get a hold on the Disassembled trade paperback, that is the storyline to read when everything falls apart and they disband the Avengers. And then after that is when they form the new Avengers, when, Marvel finally was like, we should take the Avengers and make it a team filled with all of our popular heroes. And that's when New Avengers started, and they brought in Wolverine, and they brought in Captain America, and they brought in Spider-Man, and they brought in Luke Cage, and they brought in, the heavy hitters. And but if you haven't read anything that Bendis has written, I recommend, I totally recommend Disassembled. But if you haven't read that, you need to read his run on Daredevil. Brian Michael Bendis' run on Daredevil is probably one of the most beautiful things I have ever read. I think it's volume 2 of Daredevil starts off, the first 12 issues, I believe, are written by Kevin Smith, and then Bendis takes over after Kevin's run, and then he runs with it for I want to say he is on there for almost 60, 70 issues. And it's just beautiful what he does, and the art is amazing, the story's amazing, and that's when Daredevil was the first introduction I really had into Brian Michael Bendis as a writer, and it's everything he wrote is just so well thought out and put together. So Ultimate Spider-Man, the entire run of Ultimate Spider-Man has all been Brian Michael Bendis from day one. He's written every single issue of Ultimate Spider-Man, and it is just beautifully thought out and well crafted, and he's a very, very talented writer, and I know why Marvel put so many properties in his hands and why so much goes in his direction, and that's why he was in charge of the entire Avengers lot of books for several years. I mean, he destroyed the team, then he rebuilt the team, and then he made 3 teams and wrote all the books at the exact same time.
Wow. That's crazy.
And he's just not crazy awesome writer. And then on top of the fact that he was doing all the Avengers stuff, he was still writing Ultimate Spider-Man on top of all that.
Oh, wow.
And then he stopped writing the Avengers books, and that's why he's doing the X-Men. Basically, they put him in with the X-Men lot, and okay, Bendis, let's see what you can do with the X-Men. So, I mean, it's really interesting to see him go from, hey, he's writing Daredevil, to, hey, he's in charge of the entire Avengers team, and then now we're going to give him X-Men. And he's had a lot of input with, the series. He's had a lot of input with, he helped with Amazing Spider-Man. He's had input with the movies. So, I mean, which I can also say I'm very happy that the cinematic universe is starting to rely a little bit on the comic book writers. I appreciate that.
Yes, that's very cool.
Yes. Bendis is like the guy at Marvel right now. He's their Jim Lee now.
Right.
And he's just kind of, supporting and helping mold everything that's going on with that company. And it's nice to see him start off from, his independent books of, Powers and Jinx, and now he's, the big guy at Marvel.
What was that Kevin Smith Daredevil book? Oh, God. The one he first did. It was right before the movie came out, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I was going to say, the first trade in that series I know is all Kevin. And then, the moment...
No, I'm talking about there was...
Oh, Bullseye?
No, I don't know. It was a single issue that I got from a buddy.
It was Daredevil
of mine.
Bullseye. There was one issue. It was supposed to be an entire run of a series, I believe, and he just never got around to writing the rest of it.
It might have been, but the thing of it was the villain at the end of the book was fucking Mysterio.
No, that's the first trade.
That's the first trade?
Yeah, because they end up killing Mysterio in the last issue of that, in the last page of that trade. Daredevil kills Mysterio.
Okay, then. That's... Yeah, I don't know. Like, because the whole thing was... With that issue, it was like, build up. Who's doing this? Who's doing all this stuff? And then I guess at the end, I'm like... Mysterio, really?
Well,
take a Spider-Man villain and put it in fucking Daredevil. Are you kidding me?
There's so much crossover between the lower tiered Spider-Man villains and Daredevil. It's ridiculous. I mean, I still giggle every time Stiltman shows up in a comic book. So, or when Rocket Racer is a personal favorite of mine because of the fact he's such an obscure character from the 70s. And when he shows up in a panel of anything, I was like, yeah, Rocket Racer. It's just a black guy with an afro on roller skates. That's his only power. It's just like there's, I mean, I have a bunch of comics from the 70s of Amazing Spider-Man when like the villains are Rocket Racer and the Big Wheel. It's literally a guy in a big wheel. I mean, there's nothing super innovative about it. It's just a big wheel. It spins. It looks like he's riding around a miniature Ferris wheel. It's really pathetic. But the kind of stuff that they got away with back in the 70s, just to get issues out, I was just like, how did comics not fail back then? Why were people so complacent with those types of storylines? Where now it's like, with Batman, it's like every single major villain ever in like a 10-issue arc. It's just like sometimes you get like those great story arcs now where you just get hit over the head with like every single major character, and then they do, and then it's like every time they try to give you a new villain, it's like, I don't know how to feel about this. It's like, for me, it's my favorite character in the entire comic universe is Green Goblin. I don't know what it is about Norman Osborn. I just love that character. Always liked that character. Always gravitated towards that character. Yeah. I'm a villain guy. I like a good villain. And Green Goblin's my guy. I've just enjoy the craziness, especially when they put Norman in charge of the Thunderbolts and gave him his own team, which was awesome. And he's constantly, fighting the split personality of, the Goblin and himself and trying to have a government position. And the fact that at the end of, the invasion that they put him in a spot of power and made him the hero of the story and then made Tony Stark the villain, and the role reversal bringing the villains to the foreground and making the villains the heroes and making the heroes the bad guys in Marvel was genius. The fact that they made Norman Osborn one of the greatest American heroes because he killed the Skrull Queen, and then they chastised Tony Stark and made him the most wanted man in the world is just awesome. I like it when the villains can pull one over on the heroes. So,
And that's cool. I don't know. I would like, for me in Daredevil, my only exposure before the 2003 film was Spider-Man when he appeared briefly.
I was gonna say,
in that 2 episode arc, but I'm one of those people that I like both cuts of the Daredevil movie.
I do like the director's cut. The director's cut is pretty good.
Yeah, it is. It doesn't just tie up everything it tells a better story. But I went to the theater and I saw the original cut, and I liked it. I thought it was cool. I was like, oh, cool, Daredevil on the big screen, very awesome. And, of course, Jennifer Gardner, as Elektra. And then the director's cut came out, and the director's cut was so much better as far as a storytelling point, but there's a lot of people that just hate that original theatrical cut, and I'm like, it's not as bad as what Mark Steven Johnson did with Elektra afterwards, 2 years later.
And my thing was I really liked Daredevil when it came out. I really liked the movie, and even before the director's cut came out, I enjoyed the movie. But because I liked the movie, I went out and picked up the trades. And when I read the comic, I go, wow, that movie was pretty terrible. It was like when I started just reading more and more of the comic and got to know more about Matt Murdock and his powers and about, who he was when it came all boiled down to it. I was just like, was very hokey compared to the comic, and the comic book has just this noir grittiness to it that I just think that kind of feel was just missed in the movie. I think they got a lot of stuff right, but they got a lot of stuff wrong. And it's one of those things that I think at the basic essence of it, if you read the book and you come into the movie expecting the book, you're going to be disappointed. There's very few comic movies I've seen that I feel like they capture the essence of the comic. Punisher Warzone is one of the few movies I've seen I feel actually captures the essence of the comic. I really enjoyed Warzone. I'm in a very large minority because
they had a different actor, I would have enjoyed Warzone.
And it's one of those things. I know not a lot of people like that movie. That's fine. But I just feel like, to me, it felt like a comic book. That was the big thing for me. I didn't enjoy the Thomas Jane Punisher that much until I saw the director's cut. I thought the director's cut of that movie was far superior to the theatrical release, because the theatrical release felt like an extended MacGyver episode to me. It felt like... the thing with the fire hydrant just pissed me off. That just, I was like, oh, we're doing some Three Stooges crap there.
But that's something that, okay, sure, he's doing it late at night. I'm not sure if police regularly patrol that area. Apparently they don't, but you think that they would, and you think that she would have noticed. I mean, what's her name? Liv. She's not a dumb blonde. Yeah. She's not. She's a powerful woman married to a powerful man, and you can probably look at it and think, oh, well, somebody's gonna notice that. But for the point of the story, it worked, I guess.
Yeah, and I think a lot of my issues were I found out what the Thomas Jane Punisher was loosely based off of, which was the Welcome Back trade paperback. So I went out and bought that and read that before the movie came out. I was like, oh my god, if this is what it's going to be, this is going to be phenomenal. And there's a lot of pieces of Welcome Back Frank that is ripped directly out of that book and put it in the movie, like panel by panel is in the movie. Right. And the comic is just so well done, and it just didn't... Right. And the movie just wasn't as good as the trade paperback was, is basically what it came down to. So for me, that was a part that was like, so close, but not quite there. But I mean, then there's other, comic movies that come out that just, shit all over everything, like Ghost Rider.
Oh boy.
Pick one or two. They're both terrible. Just like... I still don't fully understand what the point of Ghost Rider 1 was. And I made it 10 minutes into Spirit of Vengeance, and I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. I just can't watch this movie. I was like, I haven't had a single Marvel movie where I've just was like, screw it, I'm out. I can't do this. Nothing has been too ridiculous for me until Spirit of Vengeance.
Wow. We're going to take a quick break. You're going to hear some ads and some other audio clips and everything else. We'll come back with find out what Danner is collecting these days and what he's reading on a regular basis. We'll be back after this.
Hello, pop culture connoisseurs. Do you gain a dark sense of peace when the guilty are punished by a violent vigilante? If so, maybe you should get some therapy, and then subscribe to Punisher Body Count, the net's best podcast concerning all things Frank Castle. I'm Dane Lamont. My co-host Jake Williams and I cover the good, the bad, and the hilarious on the Punisher comics, movies, and news. Do you like chummy co-host banter? We got that. You need to get your fucking
No,
head
you need
checked,
to fucking
man.
pay attention to the fucking movie.
You want kick-ass guest interviews? How about Mike Barron and Tom Jane?
No, I like a little bit of grit in my cigar.
You want carefully considered in-depth analysis?
I mean, yeah, just won Best Picture at the Oscars yesterday. I mean, it's no Terminator. But it was still,
Good luck with that. Punisher Body Count, twice a month on Geekcast Radio.
All my work ruined. I hate Mondays. Come here. I'm the best there is at what I do, and what I do can't be imitated, copied, cloned, or used without the express written permission of the Superhero Squad and Marvel Entertainment LLC. Batteries not included. All rights reserved. Terms, conditions, restrictions apply. We clear, bub. Yes, sir.
All right, so what are you currently reading these days?
My list is very short right now. I am currently reading All New X-Men, written by Bendis. I've already mentioned earlier. I'm also reading Uncanny Avengers, which, for those that aren't reading it, they took the Avengers and they took the X-Men and they made a team together. Uncanny Avengers feature the leader of the team is Havoc, who is by far one of my favorite characters and heroes in the Marvel universe. I've always been a big Havoc fan, so it's been enjoyable. I didn't know I was gonna like it until the first issue, which also confirmed things for me. Which is the Red Skull pulls Professor Xavier's brain out of his head and melds it with his own. So now Red Skull has psychic abilities. So it pretty much solidified the fact that, okay, I guess Xavier's completely dead now. Because I don't really... It's... in the X-Men universe, everybody comes back. I don't know how they're going to pull this one off. Because they pretty much solidified the fact that Xavier's not coming back. Which I will say...
They can't do that whole Moira McTaggart brain swap thing either.
And it's pretty obvious that it's Xavier's... And that hurts me deep down, because my first son, his middle name's Xavier, for obvious reasons. So it's one of those things that it's like, oh, no more Xavier. I was like, I don't think I'm going to tell my son about this one when he grows older. I'll tell him about the good old days of Professor Xavier.
Yeah, there you go.
The other book I just picked up is the new... I just started reading Uncanny X-Men, since that just started up a couple months ago. And then I just picked up the first issue of X-Men, which is just the all-female team. And I've literally haven't even had a chance to crack that one open yet, but I'm pretty sure I'll probably end up staying with that as well. And a lot of stuff I've been kind of dabbling in. If I come in and there's only like one or two issues, I'll kind of look and pick something up. Like I checked out the first couple issues of the new Cable and the X-Force book. Yeah. Which was pretty good. I've always been a big Cable fan. Picked up the first couple issues of the Brian Posehn written Deadpool series, which is insanity. It's pure insanity spilled on pages. That's the entire first story arc is just Deadpool fighting zombie versions of all the dead presidents.
Oh wow!
And it's like it's just pure.
So it's basically Deadpool in The Walking Dead.
For the most part. And if you're not familiar with Brian Posehn, he's a stand-up comedian, and he was on the Sarah Silverman show and is the gawkiest, weirdest looking guy I've ever seen, but is absolutely hilarious. And it was like, that was a big, the moment I heard Posehn was writing the book and they got a comedian to write Deadpool, I was like, okay, I gotta check this out. And hasn't really disappointed so far. It has been just as insane and crazy as I thought it was going to be. And yeah, that's pretty much all I've really been reading right now.
Well, I will recommend, I know it seems like you are more a Marvel than a DC guy, but if you're interested, I will highly recommend Nightwing and Batgirl from DC, the current new 52 versions, because, man, between Gail Simone and Kyle Higgins, they are, at least in my eyes, two of BC, great. This is not Rockline, thank you very much. Between DC, they are the two, at least in my opinion, Gil Simone, Kyle Higgins, two best writers. They write their characters as if they just love them, and I know that they do. And it's just amazing stuff. All right, well, there you. Okay, I can't talk. Where can people interact with you online?
They can find me on Twitter at ArtDanner, and that is probably the best place to get a hold of me. You can also find me on PlayStation Network at X51 The Machine Man. And yeah, that's the best two ways to get a hold of me, Twitter or on the PlayStation Network.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't bring up the Nintendo Comics system at all, seeing as how you're a gamer. I'm surprised you didn't read any of those.
I did. That was followed into the whole, my parents got me started on Donald Duck and Daffy comics, and then I also had Captain N and the Game Masters, and I had the Game Boy comic book and the Nintendo Land comic book and The Legend of Zelda. I actually still have the trade paperbacks for those, the original ones they bought me when I was 9. Wow. I still have those sitting on my shelf.
Looks like I'm breaking into Denner's house next week.
I was going to say, you never forget where you come from in comic books. You always got to keep those reminders around.
That's right. All right, this has been the Pullbag episode 24. Up next, we are going to be talking about an episode 25 DC pre and post New 52. For the Pullbag, I've been TFG and Mike, and you are
Art Danner.
We will catch you next time. God damn it, I can't talk. Son of a bitch. We will catch you next time. Be sure to make your great escape into comics.
No one touches my comics. They're in order.
You just heard the latest episode of The Pullbag, GCRN's comic book review podcast. There are several ways to get in touch with us and leave feedback for the show. You can visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on the episode and all of our different podcasts. You can rate our show on iTunes. Be sure to leave us feedback. Call the voicemail line, 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you were leaving the message for, and your name. Become a fan of us on Facebook by searching Geekcast Radio Network. You can send us an email, feedback@geekcastradio.com. Follow us on Twitter @GeekCastRadio. So until next time, unleash the geek in you.